It's the kindest thing you've ever seen a tourist do. I didn't personally see this, but when I heard about it I felt so proud. My brother and his wife were visiting Cuba for the first time. We'll call them Dan and Alice. They always stay at all-inclusive resorts. They had visited a few of the touristy spots and felt they had not seen the real Cuba, so the next morning, they asked the man serving them breakfast if he know of anyone with a car who would be willing to show them the sights, the beauty spots known to locals but that most tourists don't get to see. The next day was his day off, so they didn't see him at breakfast, but they found him waiting for them outside with a beat-up old car that belonged to his cousin. He took them on a lovely tour of places tourists were not normally allowed to go. Alice was a type 1 diabetic, so she needed to check her blood sugar often. Their tour guide watched her test her blood and asked what she was doing. She explained and he got very excited. He said his mother was sick in the hospital, diagnosed with diabetes. The hospital could provide insulin, but only had one glucose monitor for their entire patient population. His mother couldn't stay in the hospital for the rest of her life, and once she came home, she would have no access to a glucose monitor. Alice, as it happens, had taken 3 with her. She always carried a backup because her life depended on it and they do sometimes glitch, and this time she had on impulse tossed in an extra one. She told their tour guide she had a spare monitor she could give him for his mother, plus a box of test strips, an $80 value in Canada. If he came to their table at supper time that evening, she would coach him in its use so he could show his mother what to do with it. He was thrilled and so grateful. He had feared diabetes was death sentence for his mother. The next morning when he served them breakfast, he invited them to come for an evening of music at his home with his friends. Since Dan and Alice were both musically inclined and amateur performers back home, they had a wonderful evening sharing songs and laughter. It turned out their Cuban hosts had a very accomplished performance band, well known locally. At the end of the evening they gifted Dan and Alice with a CD recording of their music, a wonderful keepsake. So a kindness from a local, the tour for which they paid him well, led to a kindness that saved a woman's life and led to more kindness and hospitality. Once they returned home, Dan and Alice stayed in touch with the Cuban waiter and regularly sent him more test strips for the glucose monitor, because at that time, they were almost impossible to get in Cuba. Hopefully things have improved since then.